Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the Mindful Living with your host Sana, where we dive deep into the stories, wisdom, practices that help us live more consciously and connect to what truly matters inside out. So, listeners, today's episode is a bit special because we are not just talking about mindfulness, but it's about the soul's path, about rediscovering ancient wisdom in a modern world that often forgets to pause. And joining me today is someone who embodies that quest. Listeners, meet Marko Petrovic. He is a visionary, world explorer, and two-time best-selling author of Soul Path and Embrace of the Elements. Marco is the heart behind the Mara project, guiding soul stirring retreats to Earth's sacred sites, helping people not just to travel, but to also transform. So, together we'll be peeling back the layers of daily life and tap into the deeper, the profound rhythms that connect us to the world and to ourselves as well. So, if you have ever felt that calling to explore beyond the ordinary, or if you are inquisitive about how ancient rituals can actually bring us to us more closer to ourselves or can bring more mindfulness into our everyday lives, this conversation is for you. So with that, Marco, welcome to the show, and it is such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Sana. Appreciate having me back again.
Okay, so yeah, Marco, oh, of course, it's so uh you know fascinating to you know explore sacred sites across the globe. I mean, we were on another podcast yesterday, and I was completely fascinated by the experiences you were mentioning. So, uh,
Mm.
how exactly you got that awakening to your own soul path? And before that, also, how exactly do you define soul path, Marco?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I feel before I even answer that, something I'd like to speak to, given that we've got this whole topic of mindfulness that we're exploring today.
Mhm.
I feel like the word mindfulness, in a way, it's a beautiful invitation to live life with more consciousness, no? But the word itself to me is a bit of a trap. And why I say it's a bit of a trap is because mindfulness puts the focus on the mind. And what I've learned through some of these ancient traditions is that they speak about us having three brains. They speak about us having the gut, which is our instinct, our feeling. They speak about us having the heart, which is our second brain, which is for the emotions. And then they speak about our mind. And what we've done in modern day society is we've got the equation back to front. Most of us spend most of our time in our mind, a little bit of time in our heart, and very little, if any, time in our gut. Whereas the ancients always spoke about how we should use them in the reverse order, actually. So the gut should be the first, the emotions, the heart, the second, and then the mind should be the third. And to create a bit of a distinction between these is uh, the gut feeling is those are the feelings that we can't quite put a word to, right? So it's like you meet someone and you feel some kind of funny, strange sensation. And you say, I don't know, I don't trust that person. Or maybe you meet someone and you feel a sense of openness to them in a way that you can't quite describe, even though you have only known them in a very brief exchange. And so that's that gut instinct where it's like the animalistic primal part of our being that recognizes the nature of someone else. And recognizing nature doesn't require words. You don't have to speak to a flower to recognize a flower, right? And we all have an expression of nature within us, that essence that speaks, even if we don't say any words. And so that's that gut feeling that we are largely numbed by, and we're numbed by it from not being mindful about the food that we eat and the stuff that we put into our temple, into our body. but also not spending time connecting with that part of ourselves. So that's that one, and then the heart being the emotional center, right? Where we have words and we have a map and a landscape for how to describe different emotions and what we feel at the level of the heart. And then the mind, what I really love from one of the traditions that I spent time with in Mexico is they said that the mind should be used the least. And in fact, the only time it should be used, there was one instruction for the mind, and that was it. And I absolutely love this. The one instruction was if you're going to use the mind, it's used to cast a beautiful thought. And when I heard that, I thought, wow, what a revelation. Most of us spend time in our mind doing what? Creating more stress, more doubt, more fear, more anxiety, more pressure. None of those are beautiful thoughts, right? And then when I heard that, I thought, wow, how fascinating that for the most part, as far as the modern world is concerned, like, well, we never get taught that. No one ever told me as a child that, hey, if you're going to use your mind, make sure you create something beautiful. But that was actually the original instruction by the ancients that if you're going to be in your mind, that's a creative center, and you have to take care. And uh, just like the title of this podcast says, be mindful about what you're creating in that space. So I really love that. And then to bring it to your question, to tie it into the soul path and how I speak about the soul path, well, it does tie in quite closely to everything I just spoke about. When we live with those three brains open and in relationship with them, then we experience what's called alignment, right? We experience that divine channel of life when we sit up a little bit taller, where we hold our head a little bit higher, where our shoulders are back and our heart is open, where we can feel life more fully. And so, this whole path for me is about recognizing that our body and those three brains that I spoke about, uh, those are all temples in which we reside, in which we live. And when we live our expression of the soul path, that's where we live and walk and breathe in a way that I refer to it's like the movie script of our own life. Like the divine, the universe, the cosmos, God,
Yeah.
whoever you want to refer to as the holy and the sacred, um, wrote out a beautiful script for our journey through life. And it's like the more I lean into saying yes to that journey, the more alignment I feel, the more clarity I experience, and the greater that my faculties have an opportunity to express themselves. And of course, it comes with equal amounts of support and challenge. So I am definitely a voice for being level headed about the journey. It's not all beautiful butterflies and rainbows. We have our challenges along the way, of course, but the soul path allows us to experience life from a greater state of expansion and awareness and in a greater state of flow.
That is beautifully explained, Marco. Beautifully explained. And I loved how you stressed on the actual importance role of mindfulness in connecting to these deeper experiences. And many people see mindfulness as maybe meditation or breath work or just uh, to be present, aware about the presence or the present. But your work introduces rituals and nature based practices. So how can embracing these into daily life deepen or even redefine what mindfulness means for us? Because it is somehow visiting these ancient, sacred places, connecting with our ancestors. It is kind of taking us into the past to help us, be aware about the present. So that's kind of really exciting. So what's your opinion about that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation. And well, there's a couple of things that come to mind for me that
Hmm.
I'd love to speak to. Um, the first one that kind of stood out to me from what you said was like this theme of connecting to our ancestors. And why I speak to that is because, as far as mindfulness goes, there's the question of like, what are we actually mindful of, and what is that is completely unknown to us because we haven't even lifted the blanket on that part of our human experience. So for me, a large part of the soul path of visiting these sacred sites, of paying homage to our ancestors, is about redefining the human experience, or more than redefining it, opening into what it actually is. Because through authorities, schools, teachers, preachers, influences in our lives, we get told that life is a certain thing. But what I've consistently discovered through my direct experience and by no books or opinions of others is that life actually flowers in ways that I can't even begin to imagine the moment I lean into this journey of the soul path of visiting the sacred sites, of paying my respects. And when I speak about sacred sites, like oftentimes people might jump to uh, the big ones, right? The popular ones. So it might be the pyramids in Egypt, or it might be Machu Picchu in Peru, or some of these very well-known ones. The sacred sites are also where my ancestors were buried, and it doesn't have to be sacred to the world. It can be if whoever walks on there understands that the earth that they're walking on is the dust of somebody's ancestors. Like every day that we walk on the earth, we walk on the dust that were once bones of somebody a long time ago.
Mm.
And when we come into that awareness, well, how does that change the human experience? Well, all of a sudden I realized that I'm really not alone in any way, even if I am by myself. I'm not alone because underneath my feet are generations upon generations of beings that have existed. And when I speak about ancestors, I don't just speak about the ancestors of my direct blood. I speak about the ancestors of that which fed all of that. So that speaks about plants, that speaks to flowers and honey, that speaks to animals that gave their lives so that people could sit around a table and eat. Like I consider all of those to be ancestors. And so in that way, by opening up my blinders from thinking about ancestors as just my grandma and grandpa and who came before them,
Mhm.
and this speaks to the true ancestors that we all share. Even though we're of different blood, you and I share the same ancestors. And uh, the oldest one is this rock that we get to call home, this earth.
Yeah, yeah.
And whether I go to Mount Kailash, or I go to Mount Everest, or I go to Mount Kilimanjaro, or the mountains in New Zealand, they're all connected to the same heartbeat of this earth. And so in that way, I experience this journey of sacred sites as if I am a needle
Mhm.
of on the body of the earth, just like when you have acupuncture or acupressure therapy. And it's like each time you touch a certain spot, something wakes up,
Yeah.
something heals, and energy releases. A stress gives way. A new channel of awareness opens up, more clarity, less cloudiness. Life moves through me in ever more graceful ways. And so I know that there's this big piece of, like to go to a sacred site, it's so much effort, it's energy, it's money, it's everything. And I
Yeah.
agree, but there's something profound about giving oneself the opportunity to make that pilgrimage. And that pilgrimage doesn't have to be to the other side of the world. In my instance, that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. But for many years, my pilgrimage was a 45 to minute to 1 hour drive. And I did this for about 10 years to a spring water in Australia where I used to live. And I used to collect about 500 liters of spring water every time I'd go. And I'd bring that
Yeah.
back to my house. And I'd give thanks to the mountain. I'd give thanks to the water. I'd give thanks to the journey to go out in nature. And I come back with water for my family to drink and to cook with. And so all we used for over a decade, thanks to me and my brother and my sister joined me from time to time. Sometimes my dad came with me. Was all thanks to that sacred site.
That is once again beautiful. And as you mention about water, you talk about all the elements, earth, water, fire, air. I mean, how beautifully they can be the tools for reconnection. So, how can tuning into these elements help us cultivate mindfulness in a tangible way, Marco? Especially for those, because most of us we are feeling disconnected from nature.
Well, I like to look at language, right? And I look at the way that we phrase our experiences. And they say that our words, like with our words, we cast spells. That's why they call it spelling, because we're creating a spell every time we speak. And when I look at the word disconnected, to me, like it can't exist without connected. So then, what is the dissonance? It's the removing myself from my center that gives me an experience that I'm disconnected. In truth, it doesn't mean that I am, because I'm connected to the fact that I'm disconnected. So that's information right there. So if I was truly cut off entirely, then I wouldn't have an experience of being disconnected. It would be something else that I can't speak to because I've never been cut off. Right? I'd imagine uh, that's, well, as far as I'm aware, that's not part of the human experience. Maybe it is, right? But as far as I'm aware, that theme that people go through of being disconnected, well, we're still connected to something. But the question is, what are we connected to? And oftentimes, that which we're connecting to in that experience of disconnection is, you can use different words to frame it, but it can be some kind of heaviness or weightiness or some kind of pressure or stress, or it can just be a spaciousness, a space from something that we'd like to encounter.
Yeah.
And one of the big ones that I see many times that I've helped people on their journeys through is what I refer to as the sweetness of life. So typically, when people tell me that they're disconnected, it's because they're not experiencing the sweetness of life. And the sweetness of life is that part of you that stops to smell the flowers when you walk past them. The sweetness of life is that part of you that when you see a child running through the streets, you smile. That sweetness is the same sweetness that takes a moment to give your partner a kiss in the morning or a hug or on your way out the door. That's the sweetness of life, right? That's that poetry of life that has us feel like life is a song. And what I've seen time and time again that like has people uh, disconnect from that and have that experience of disconnection is just living too quickly, too much speed. And it's very easy to live quickly in a world where we have smartphones and technology that can give us a million notifications that our ancestors never experienced. So 2 generations ago, the only notifications you have was from the people that came into your space that you spoke with. Whereas
Yeah.
now, if I put up a post that goes viral on social media, I can speak to 10,000 people in 1 hour. Well, that's something completely new for our systems to learn how to work with. But even though the quote unquote problem gets increasingly more complicated with technology, the solution still remains embarrassingly simple. And the solution still is uh, to have mindful breaths. Firstly, that's how we slow down. We just take a big deep breath and allow the noise to settle. Because what I encounter is the noise in my life only gets noisier if I keep leaning into it. And when I realize that I'm the one that's leaning into the noise, and sometimes it's hard to realize because we have experiences like if someone that we really care about upsets us or does something, and then it's really hard because you want to blame that person and say, they did this to me or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's still me leaning into the noise. And yes, the other person did some actions and whatever, but my responsibility is to not lean into the noise, to maintain my peace and my center. And so I'm giving an extreme example that some people may or may not agree with, and that's okay. But I ask myself, how do I continue to move through life with continued grace and peace and a state of connection? Well, I can't continue to be connected with life if I'm upset at someone and I'm trying to push them away from my experience. I have to learn how to love them despite what they've done and how to be grateful for them. And what I found in my journey, and I read about this in my book Soul Path. I had a teacher, a mentor, a guide who took a lot of money on an agreement that we would protect some sacred land, which is part of my life's mission and very important to me. And he took that money and did something else in it. With it. I won't say what, but that's for people that curious to read about in the book. But he did something that you will never expect from a spiritual teacher.
Yeah.
And as long as I was angry with him, my life wasn't getting any easier, and I was experiencing disconnection. But the moment I brought him into my heart and I looked at how can I be grateful for this and what has all of this taught me, I found that the greatest darkness, and that was one of the darker moments of my life, actually
Mhm.
carry the greatest treasures. Thanks to that, we're actually having this conversation right now. Thanks to that, I actually wrote my book. Thanks to that, I get to now put on retreats around the world that are of a degree of impeccability that few other people do, because I was able to go through that whole process and not have it be the reason that I gave up, but have it be the reason that I forged myself into being an even better human.
Mm. Oh, that is really, really interesting. Really interesting. Really, I mean, it shifts the whole perspective from, um, kind of getting into that rabbit hole of anger or resentment, and then getting into that noise of blaming, uh, but more, uh, into learning from those maybe darkest moments, and then you know making ourselves better, making ourselves more and more connected and aware. So that's a good one, Marco. Good one. I mean,
Yeah.
fortunately, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like what that speaks to at a deeper level for me is, this experience of life that I've come to know from going to visit many sacred sites and spending time in nature is that uh, most people experience life through a dual lens, through the lens of duality. So there's good and there's bad, there's right and there's wrong, there's positive and there's negative. And that is a part of the human experience, but it's not the only one that's available to us. There is also an experience that is union, where we don't separate according to good and bad. Rather, the way that I experienced it with uh, the way that some of these ancient schools speak about it is it's just vibration. It's just energy. And so some people are allergic to some vibrations that feel heavier or denser because they've been told that they're bad. For example, a topic that is a little taboo in many cultures is that of rage
Yeah.
or fury. Now, rage and anger are not the same thing. Anger is being in the volatility of the emotion. Rage is that pure primal energy that also has a man say, if my family is in danger, I will put my life on the line to defend them.
Yes, yes.
And so rage is actually beautiful. The same
Yeah.
rage one can use to harm a loved one because they're in an argument, they can use to create something really beautiful. I wrote some of the best songs I've written in my life thanks
Mhm.
to a rageful, like a moment where I was containing a lot of rage. And it's that teaching of rather than becoming the storm, maintaining ourselves as the eye of the storm and walking through it. And that's this piece of mindfulness that I feel we're speaking about here, of being uh, accurately and acutely conscious of the way that we deploy our energy
Mhm.
when we choose to engage with anything. And I'm just using rage as an extreme example because it can hopefully uh, create some openings in space for the listeners to reflect up what other emotions are there that perhaps I'm allergic to that I don't enjoy, and how can I look at them through a lens of union rather than duality? What if I didn't call them good or bad? What if I just experienced them as vibration, as energy? And what if I realized that the kundalini, that serpent energy that exists in all of us, is exactly that? It shows us how to elevate energy from the base to the crown, and also how to pull it down according to what we need.
Mhm. That is deep. That's really profound. Thank you, Marco, for giving this particular perspective to think about, to do a bit of self introspection, and of course, this was really, really such an expansive conversation, yet grounding. And then thank you for reminding us that, for redefining mindfulness, and it doesn't have to be just confined to something as, uh, very popular as meditation, but also it can be in the rituals, in the elements, water, fire, earth, air, in the sweetness of nature, in the sweetness of a child playing, and in the way we listen to ourselves and the world around us. So thank you.
Thank you, Sana. I really enjoyed it. And if there was like one little message that I'd love to give to the listeners to take home with themselves is like what you mentioned there about meditation is that disciplines are beautiful. And I, I've throughout my life have many disciplines and still that I deploy to this day. But to have that fine awareness of when the discipline goes from being the thing that supports us to the thing that controls us. Because as important as it is to be mindful, our egos will still form even around something like I'm now a mindful person. And the moment our ego starts to form is the moment that it starts to limit our capacity to experience life at ever greater depth. And so, what I like to do from time to time is to, like, when I hear things like this, of what I've been speaking about here, that may be new to some people or maybe uncommon, I treat it like a piece of clothing. It's something I try on and I see how it fits. Like, I don't debate it intellectually too much. Will this work? Will it not work? I try it on and I take a look and I say, I like this. I'll do it for a little while. And then I do it like that.
That's beautiful. Beautiful, Marco. Okay. And listeners, if you feel inspired to bring more meaning to your lives or mindfulness practices, connect with Marco. I'll have his Instagram link in the show notes. And also, I would urge all of you to explore his books, Soul Path and Embrace of the Elements, or even consider one of his transformative retreats. And as always, I'm urging all of you to be mindful, to be curious, and also live profoundly. Thank you.